In today's complicated world, very little seems to happen by chance. A lot of planning goes into ensuring we are using our resources most efficiently, and one of our most precious resources is our space. At the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, interior design majors learn how to design and equip spaces to make them functional yet appealing. I'm Chuck Cantrell, and this is Metro Campus, the UTC Report. Today we're learning about interior design, and let me tell you, it's not about matching pillows to curtains. So come back for Metro Campus, the UTC Report. Hello and welcome back to Metro Campus, the UTC Report. I'm Chuck Cantrell. Interior space is important. It's where we spend most of our time and accomplish most of our work. So we need it to function properly. In our living spaces, we want to enjoy comfortable yet functional spaces, and none of this happens by chance. Professional interior designers play an important role in shaping and creating our world. At the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, interior design has become one of the fastest growing majors, and this year, the program will expand its academic offerings to include master's degree programs. My guest today is Dr. Dana Moody, head of the UTC Department of Interior Design. Dana, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So, I think there's this misinterpretation or confusion about what exactly is interior design, and I think it's a big difference between design and decorating. That's probably the word that we're looking for.
Well, when most people think of interior design, they think of beautiful spaces. But real interior design is more like an onion, and if you can look past the surface of the beautiful decor that's there, there is a lot of strategies and techniques that have gone into the thinking. In particular, a trained interior designer is focusing on improving the quality of life of those who are using the space and protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public.
So why is UTC's programs doing so well? Is it a popular career right now? What do we have to offer that perhaps some other programs don't?
Well, our program in particular is a CETA accredited program, which is what makes sure that we have really high standards. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we're in Chattanooga, and Chattanooga is just a great place to be and to learn about revitalization with our downtown growth, and it's just a good resource.
So what kind of courses would an interior design major take? What are the topics that they might cover?
In the beginning, they learn some skills that they may not have. For instance, they may learn how to draft, how to sketch. But in the end, what they're really doing is they're synthesizing a lot of information. For instance, our students focus on human factors. They have to learn about anthropometrics, which is the measurements of the human body. That's then used in ergonomics, which is how to use those measurements to make sure that people are working functionally in a safe space. We also will use proxemics, which is how close people are to each other without being a little bit freaked out. They have to learn how the human body ages naturally, as well as know all the characteristics of disabilities, so that we know how these spaces impact all people.
Now, I know you guys are very excited because you just opened last year, I think, a new lab. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that lab, and I think they're going to show some video of it as well.
Yeah, you know, the lab is an exciting space. It's a little bit of a paradigm shift from our traditional drafting studios because it's dedicated to our seniors. Each senior has its own individual space, but the room itself is actually a really inspiring room in that we partnered with local artists from Area 61. David Crew and Brian Strickland in particular are who created the furnishings. And you know, they're not only functional, they're inspiring and they're beautiful. In fact, now Brian Strickland's one of our adjunct professors, so we got a lot out of that project.
So what kind of skills do interior design majors need to bring to the program? Do you have to be a good artist, or?
You know, the truth is a really successful interior design student thinks on both sides of the brain. They're not only creative, but they have a lot of technical skills. Our students have to be proficient in AutoCAD, in Revit, in the full Adobe suite, so lots of computer skills. But on top of that, they have to know the technology that goes to the building itself. So lighting, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and then there's a heavy focus on life safety codes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think people would be surprised at how much regulation and code work there is.
There is.
And that's important. So what about the aesthetic part of it? How do you get that through to students?
Well, I have to be honest, I think some people are born with the ability to see what looks good and how to get it there. We're doing all the supplemental information, which is learning the skills of how to use that talent.
And so tell me a little bit about, I walk through the hall sometimes and I see these beautiful display cabinets that have models and things. Do the students actually make them themselves, or are there programs that help with that? Are they using 3D printing? I mean, it looks like things I could never do.
Well, they have a whole class just to learn how to do models, and then of course it's integrated into other classes. And we do some 3D printing also. But you know, the idea is when you look at space three-dimensionally, you can see issues and problems that you can't see in a two-dimensional floor plan.
So how good are the job prospects right now?
Our students are doing very well. They're getting jobs in a variety of fields. Right now we have people going into corporate design, kitchen and bath design, hospitality, which is hotels and restaurants. We also have people going into more specialized areas such as lighting design, product design, historic preservation, and probably one of the more interesting alumni I have designs nothing but custom jet airplanes. So
wow.
There's just a really wide array of jobs you can get with this degree.
It sounds like, when you say designing airplanes, it sounds like an engineer's job or something, so they kind of have to know a little bit of everything. I tell you what, we're going to have to take a break here in just a minute, but when we come back I want to talk about the new master's degree programs.
Yes.
And what those will bring to the program and why you wanted to do them. And also a little bit about, you mentioned historical preservation. I want to talk about some of the projects that I know your students are doing out in the community, because some of that has involved preservation as well. And I just love you guys. You guys do a super job and are doing so much fun stuff. I tell you, we'll have to come back. We'll continue our conversation about the UTC Department of Interior Design. Hello, welcome back to Metro Campus. I'm Chuck Cantrell. We're discussing the UTC Department of Interior Design with Dr. Dana Moody. Then during the break we were talking a little bit about the television show Designing Women and how that perhaps misrepresented what you guys really do. And so tell me, why do you think there is this sort of misconception?
Well, you know, honestly, the media in general very rarely distinguishes the difference between someone who decorates space and someone who is a trained interior designer. And, you know, really, in the end, what the public sees is still beautiful spaces. So they don't often realize how much forethought that has gone into the space to make sure that it's psychologically and physiologically healthy for the client.
I think you mentioned that you guys work hand in hand with architects, because I think in many ways your work is much more like an architect in some ways.
Well, you know, I'm not going to say like an architect, but in the end we work in teams with architects, engineers, and people in the construction industry. And to be able to do that, you have to have a similar foundation of knowledge and a similar language, but everyone still has their own job.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about these master's programs, and I know you're starting two, and what are they and how are they different?
Well, we have started a Master's of Science degree and a Master's of Interior Design. They're very similar in that they're both post-professional degrees. They're meant for professional interior designers, architects, people within the building industry who want to get a master's degree, but also want to get an area of specialization. And being that we're in Chattanooga, we just really felt that our strength was in urban revitalization. Everything from historic preservation to sustainability, we think Chattanooga is the perfect laboratory for. So the big difference between the two degrees is one is a standard master's degree, that's the Master's of Science, but the Master's of Interior Design is actually a terminal degree that is preparing you to become a professor and teach in higher education.
So you mentioned the laboratory aspect of the community, and I know that's a big emphasis across the campus.
Yes.
How do we get our students engaged in real life learning, experiential opportunities? What do you guys have going on in the interior design department that gets the student out of the classroom and into that laboratory?
Well, we often incorporate in our studio courses real projects or working with real people. But one of the classes in particular that does that best is our senior thesis project. We are partnered with Cornerstones, and they, along with River City Company, help us locate abandoned, derelict historic buildings in downtown Chattanooga. The students do full historic structures reports on these buildings, create revitalization plans, and present it back to the owners of the building. And the whole concept behind this is to create some kind of excitement so developers will want to take these buildings and actually revitalize them.
I tell you what, I've seen some that your students worked on, I think for a building on ML King.
Right.
And it's not only, they don't just offer ideas to preserve it, they reinvent it. Is that by purpose that there's elements of the old, but it's new and exciting in a different way?
Well, hopefully what they're doing is they're also researching that neighborhood, and they're looking for something that is going to be viable to that neighborhood, not just independent to the structure.
I think I saw one where there was a beautiful like grand piano, and they were talking about creating some kind of like evening space or something. So do your students do internships?
They're all required to do a 320-hour internship under a licensed professional.
So tell me, what does it take to become a licensed professional versus just someone who's out there, again, probably fluffing pillows and doing the decorating?
Well, the easy way to remember it is the 3 E's. To become a licensed professional, first you get your education, then you do a 2-year to 4-year experience where you're working in the field, gaining experience, and then you sit for the NCIDQ exam. At that point in time, you're ready to become registered with the state.
So I know you guys do a lot of traveling in your program. Tell us about some of the trips you've taken.
Oh gosh, you know, every fall we like to do a small trip because we believe our students learn more by seeing with their eyes than looking at a book or hearing a lecture. And we believe the small trip is affordable enough for every student to go if they want. We go to places like Chicago, Savannah, Charleston, New Orleans, Washington, D.C., just somewhere to get them out of Chattanooga. But then in the summers, we like to do bigger things. We like to do either large domestic trips like a week in New York, or maybe we're doing international trips. This upcoming summer of 16, we'll be taking a group of students to Italy for 18 days.
So how would they experience interior design differently, say in Italy, or in even New York City than they would here in Chattanooga?
You know, I think anytime you're experiencing a culture other than your own, you're more sensitive to any client that's out there and how their culture may be different than your own. Also, you see lots of products and materials. You see the precedent of design that came before, you know, then it's beautiful and so detailed, and a lot of times they can't see that here.
I was going to ask, how has design changed? Because you've talked a lot about computer skills and CAD skills and things like that, and there was a time, I even remember when I started working as a journalist, I used a typewriter.
Yes.
So how has this field changed over the last 20 years or so?
Well, you mentioned technology. So technology's been a huge change, but that's more in the presentation of the design. The way the designs themselves have changed more is they're so much more sensitive to the human that's interacting in the space, but we're also more sensitive to the earth itself. Sustainable design is, some people think of it as a hot topic, but I think it is just good design, period. So whether we're talking about what it costs to bring in new materials or what type of chemicals those materials are putting out, it's just really important to make sure that we're using sustainable materials.
And how do you keep students sort of up on top of that?
Well, we get them around professionals as much as possible. They are invited to CEUs. And then, of course, we bring in really good, great lectures, and frankly, we have good faculty too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I happen to know your faculty, and you're exactly
Yes.
right. I tell you, we're going to take another break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more, and I want to ask you about something called universal design. I know that's a big topic. We have to take another break. When we come back, we'll conclude our conversation about interior design at UTC. Hello, and welcome back to Metro Campus, the UTC Report. I'm Chuck Cantrell. Okay, Dana, tell me a little bit about a concept called universal design. It's something I've heard about. I feel like I know just enough to be wrong and dangerous about it. So
No.
explain it to us.
Well, the definition of universal design is creating good design for all people, no matter their age or their ability level. So if you are building, let's say, a house, and you use universal design principles, the house should evolve no matter what the abilities of the client is. So hopefully you live a long life and you age and you just have natural aging. The house should progress with you. Or maybe you have a teenage son who broke his leg playing football. The house should accommodate that. And a good example might be to use a lever handle on a door instead of a traditional knob. We think that lever handle might be great for a person who's aged and has arthritis, but in reality, it's good for a young mother carrying her children, trying to get in the house, holding bags of groceries. She can use her elbow to get in. And
kind of hip it if you need to.
Yeah, so the point of universal design is that it's good for everybody.
Well, and every once in a while you'll see a counter space that's much lower. So
Yes.
what are some other examples that might be, I would think in a bathroom might be a really big place where there's some, what are some of the other examples?
Well, you know, people are different heights and sizes, and you mentioned the different heights of counters. It's really important that as a person ages, they have the ability to conserve energy. So what we might think of as a place to sit down and put on makeup also is great for an older person when they're blow drying their hair, and what they've done is they've saved that energy for a task that needs it. So, you know, another thing about universal design, you go into a bathroom that's covered in grab bars and you think, oh, you know, I would never want that in my house. But universal design slips that kind of thing in to where it looks beautiful and it's just a part of the decor. And, you know, whether you're just hanging a bath rag on it or actually using it to pull yourself out of a tub, it is a functional piece.
Yeah, we had some friends who moved into a home where the previous owner had been in a wheelchair, and so there were some counter spaces that were much lower, and they used them to cook with their kids and stuff.
That's right.
And so it was and the other thing that I loved about that house is the doors were wider.
Right.
And so that was made it a lot easier when
And
we helped
usually
them move.
hallways. But those are the things that if a person ever did end up in a wheelchair, would prevent them from being able to continue living in their home, or it would be huge amounts of money to retrofit. But it's very small, and when you're building the house to integrate those ideas. But beyond a wheelchair, it thinks of things like how your eye changes as you get older. How do you reduce glare, temperature sensitivity? Something as simple as putting a light switch next to your bed so that you're not going through a dark room to get to the bathroom in the middle of the night.
What a great idea. That's a smart idea. So let me ask you this. Has the aging population changed how interior designers approach spaces now?
Well, the aging population has probably changed every profession, not only because there's so many baby boomers, but because baby boomers are smart and they expect the world to meet their needs. So there are more people that are educated that come to interior designers wanting to be sure that the house they're building is going to be with them until they, you know, decide to retire and stay in that home forever.
I tell you what, we're going to have to go here in just a minute, but if someone is interested in the interior design program, what should they do? Who should they contact, and how should they do that?
Well, there's 3 ways you can find us. You can contact us at our office at 423-425-4550. You can go to the UTC website and find our webpage, or you can look us up on Instagram at UTC_interior_design.
And so what kind of photos are they likely to see on Instagram?
Well, you know, that's an interesting question, because when you go to the website, you see the photos we want you to see. When you go to Instagram, you see what life is really like. You're going to see everything from students being proud of their projects to sleeping under their desk.
Well, I'm probably taking some of those cool trips and things like that.
Oh, yes, all that's there.
So if someone is interested in the graduate programs, do they need to contact you, or should they contact the graduate office?
I would, if they're looking for information about the program, they should contact me. and then if they're ready to apply, they would contact the graduate school.
Okay, I tell you what, we're going to have to end it with that because we're almost out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you're interested in anything we discuss here on Metro Campus, especially the Interior Design Department, you can always find more information by visiting the UTC website at www.utc.edu. You can find everything about UTC at that one site. And that's all the time we have for this installment of Metro Campus, the UTC Report. I'm Chuck Cantrell. See you next time. Thanks.